Alright, those of you who complained last week about the Hebrew, I have English for you. And those of you who liked the Hebrew, I have a little bit of Hebrew for you.
What are you learning this week?
This week we're learning more things. Last week I discovered something I'd like to share with you. I shared Rav Kook last week. And this week, Rav Peretz gave a class. Maybe today, maybe Thursday, I don't know. And one of my students paraphrased the ending of the class and sent it to me, and I was very inspired. Because it's the philosophy that we have in a nutshell. The problem is that there's a teaching that the rabbis tell us that when you have something al pi Kabbalah, you have something as a transmission from your teacher. For example, there are many things that I have as directives or orders from my rabbi, and I do them. I don't always teach them to everyone else because they are hard to be backed up or sourced in classic texts, and so therefore I have license to follow them, my family, because I'm a student. But in order for me to be able to pass it on, I have to be able to back it up and justify it. And it's a very recent thing that you hear things from one person, just pass it on to another person without finding a source for it. This specific piece, I have a source for it, so I was able to share it, and so I decided to bring it to the table today. And perhaps you'll discover something with me which we don't always know to be true. The Rambam, when he started writing his books, caused an uproar in the Jewish world. An uproar is a nice word to call what happened in the Jewish world when the Rambam started writing. Hated him. Burned his books in the streets. Persecuted his students. Maimonides, this is the one today. Everything Jewish is the Rambam, but then he wasn't exactly as popular as we might want. What? Especially in Europe, but also in Baghdad. The community of Baghdad had a big Rosh Yeshiva who claimed the Rambam was a heretic, and such terrible things that I would rather not repeat them at this table. After the test of time, so obviously we're students of the Rambam, but it took that test in order to be able to accomplish that. One of the big critiques in the Rambam was not his Moreh Nevuchim, was not his guide to the perplexed. It wasn't his philosophy on the world. Rather, the most controversial thing that the Rambam did, and you might not find it so controversial, is to write a book without sources. I'll say it again. He wrote a book in Jewish law without sources.
It's incredible.
That's what the world went up in arms with him. Now today, I challenge you to find books with sources. Today, everyone pulls something out of their head, out of their pants, out of their pocket, and they read it in a book, they publish it, they read it in Jewish communities, and it became practice. But to back up your claims with sources is a fundamental part of Jewish thought. You can't claim something, especially if you want it to be binding on other people, if you can't back it up. And so the Rambam got himself in big trouble. The Rambam felt that he was simplifying Jewish study. It's like, obviously my sources are the Talmud. I'm just trying to write these laws in a way that your layman can understand it. He said, if I just tell you, oh, this one was in that rabbi, and that rabbi argued with this rabbi, he said, by the time people have a chance to know what to do on Shabbat, they might be dead. It'll be so long. So I'd rather just give them what they need to know. The Rambam was saved. Very good, Rabbi Yosef Karo. And perhaps here begins the interesting relationship that even though the Rambam is the halachic rabbi of the Yemenites, I would say that from all the Jewish communities, they have the handle on the Rambam. The Sfaradim are also obsessed with the Rambam, even though they don't always follow him, because the Sephardic rabbi Rabbi Yosef Karo was also obsessed with the Rambam. And what Rabbi Yosef Karo did is he went through the entire Rambam and wrote a commentary called the Kesef Mishneh. The Rambam's book is called the Mishneh Torah, the review of the Torah, so he wrote the Kesef Mishneh, the silver review, I guess would be a translation. And he gave sources for every single thing the Rambam said. You have to understand, this is before Google, before the Bar Ilan Responsa project, this is before Wikipedia. Imagine someone saying, hey, could you go through the Talmud and give sources for every verse where it comes from in the Tanakh by heart? By heart, just go through it and give sources, page numbers, verse numbers. That's just the Tanakh. What Rabbi Yosef Karo had to do is give sources from the Mishnah, from the Talmud, from the Baitot, from the Sifra, from the Sifri, from the Tosefta, from Tanakh, obviously. all the way down till his generation, by heart. It tells you something about Rabbi Yosef Karo. But it also tells you something about the importance in Judaism to back up your claims with text. If it's too hot in here, too cold, there's a fan and there's an air conditioning, so just you be on top of that.
Why by heart? When you...
With the help of books. But you have to know all those books in order to source them. Yeah. And for example, there was a similar claim you should know on Chabad. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the last one, was bothered by the fact that many of the classic Hasidic works in Chabad didn't have sources. And so what he did is, on his own, before he became the Rebbe, on his own, you have to imagine when he had time, if he was not yet the Rebbe, if his life wasn't dedicated to this, he gave sources for every single, most of the footnotes you'll find in the bottom of Chabad books were written by Lubavitcher Rebbe by heart.
But he was a very clever man because he went to the Sorbonne and he got his degrees.
But in the Sorbonne, they didn't teach him Talmud and Kabbalah and Chassidut and. I mean, he was okay. Yes, but that.
But that he knew. I understand that he knew that. But remember, he wasn't a closed-minded person.
Yes, but I'm saying to source a book that you didn't write and to be able to give all, it's an incredible feat. And you find that this is important in all circles of Jewish life, to source things, always sourcing things. Rav Kook, Allah had the same problem. Rav Kook was criticized for writing books of Kabbalah without giving sources for them. And once when Rabbi David Aaron asked Rabbi Fisher, Allah Shalom, I believe he's Allah Shalom or his brother is Allah Shalom, one of the Rabbi Fishers isn't around, so I'm taking back that Allah Shalom. He asked Rabbi Fisher, hi, his teacher in Kabbalah, I said, hey, what are Rav Kook's sources? He said the entire Torah is Rav Kook's sources, everything back and forth. But it's not enough to hold up in a court of law. So Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, his son, put all the sources for his father's writings in the books. You find this is a very important thing to do. In the Jewish world today, sources are not considered so important. Did the opposite. What did he do?
Well, most of the commentary was sources.
Was sources. Rabbi Yosef made problems for people, by the way, and in many ways. But one of his big problems. How about you have some cottage cheese first? What do you say?
Yeah.
Cookies. Of course, your mom's gonna come, and then we're gonna have shalom bayit problems, eh? We won't.
How about banana? We thought of something too.
These are gluten-free because they're rice and corn. Come. So, I was telling you, sources today, the world, people believe things that rabbis say, that scholars say, that Torah says, without ever looking up for themselves. Is that what it is? I was telling you about Rabbi Yosef making problems with people. Rabbi Yosef had the opposite problem. He knew too many sources. And normally he would beat people with sources that they never heard about. For example, you would argue with Chacham Rabbi Yosef, and then he would write back to you a letter with 70, 80, 90 sources, 60 of which you could never find in your local library, and only he knew by heart. And so it was almost like arguing with a wall, but you couldn't get over these numbers, which is when the Jewish community became defensive. The names is not all that counts, also logic is what counts, and then it became a very interesting debate between Chacham Ovadia and the rest of the rabbis in this time. But sources, to source things. Not just in the Jewish world, also in your life. You hear something about someone. Lashon hara. Don't just believe what you hear. I'm not telling you now how to do Lashon hara or not. But even if you want to listen to Lashon hara, this is your avera. It's what you do. You have to make sure that what you're hearing is true. Sometimes people will say things about other people. They reach that conclusion. They came to that assumption. Mark Twain says that he loves rumors because he learns all kinds of things about himself that he never knew. People say things and all kinds of things. You have to be a person who looks into sources. Figure out, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. I want to look into it. Don't just believe everything somebody tells you, for the good and for the bad. To be one who does do your research, do your homework. In the world of social media, I cannot tell you how many times a day something comes across my TV, my computer screen, my phone screen, my email, scientists in Harvard discovered that drinking too much water is the leading cause for heart problems, whatever they'll write. Oh, we must stop drinking water, you can only drink Coca-Cola. People come with such a thing. And now it's blatantly not true. But people spread this like, what? They don't look. It says Harvard, it says Johns Hopkins University, whatever it says, and they just forward it to you. Or how many of us, by the way, even now in conflicts in Israel, we send around pictures that are supposedly backing up Israel's claim. Look at downtown Gaza, look at this picture. And really this picture is in France somewhere. And some idiot wanted to help Israel, but instead he's lying. And it's just a simple Google search, and you'll find this picture on your own, and then it'll make us look like we're liars. And what's the point of helping Israel with lies if we have enough true things we could say that will help Israel? You have to be a person who does their research. Don't just send it and keep passing on information. Yummy, it's good. It's good for you. It's good, it's good. Taim. Not taim? Okay, come out. The joys of parenting. Okay. Whoa. Don't like it. Psst. Hey. He knows it's cute and that everyone's watching it.
Yeah.
There was once a story in our yeshiva in Yerushalayim where somebody there was the guy who was accused of a terrible thing. They accused him of having relations with one of his children. And it wasn't true. And when they went and they did the research of what happened, how did this rumor even happen, it turns out that someone in the place where he was praying, he came to synagogue, and there was a guy who used to be his friend for 20 years. And he said, I heard that you stole from someone, or you did something. He said, me, I would do that just like I would sleep with someone in my family. Somebody heard this and passed around a whole rumor that this man said, and it wasn't true, but the man's life was ruined by this. He was stupid for saying it. I'm sorry, I have to tell you, this is such a ridiculous thing to say. But what about the friend for 20 years? He still goes around passing a rumor that he knows isn't true. You have to make sure things that you say, how they'll be perceived, but also that when you hear things, you don't just accept them on face value. Make sure you heard them correctly. Make sure you heard them the first time. We project a lot of the things that we're feeling or thinking onto what other people are telling us. But my area of focus today is going to be specifically in Jewish sources. The most common question that I get asked whenever I teach something is, if that's true, then why do all the other rabbis do X or say Y? And the truth is that the phrase, all the other rabbis, is a lie, because you will never find that many rabbis that all agree on something. It's just a fact of the way the world works. We don't agree on anything, and that's part of being Jewish, and it seems to be part of being a rabbi. But it's a valid argument, but it's based in a mistake. So what if all the people in the world do X? You know the fact that you're Jewish? You're a minority in the world religions. There's 1 billion Christians out there, 1 billion Muslims out there. You're a nothing. What are we? We're 12 million Jews in the world. If all the other people in the world believe X, then why are you doing Y? Well, of course, because it doesn't make a difference how many people do something. You still have to make sure that you're following the truth.
In the Talmud, I heard of a rabbi who walked in a field, and a baby, they call a baby, told him...
Listim shekamocha kivshu.
Right.
It's a very good story. It's a good place to start today's class. Somebody once asked him a similar question. Well, if you're right, then why does everyone... It's a famous story. His name was Rabbi Yosef HaGlili. I believe it was him. Or Rabbi Yochanan, more correctly. He was taking a shortcut. He was walking through someone's field. Like on Shabbat, if you walk to my house, you walk through Stanley Park. But this was a private field he was walking through. And he saw a little girl. And this little girl said, how can you walk through someone else's field? You're ruining their grass, you're trampling on their earth, they planted something, you're stepping on it. How are you walking through their garden? And so he says, but isn't this a derech kavush larabim? You see, there's a trail going through here. So many people have walked through here that I'm just doing what everyone else is doing. And she answered back to him, Listim shekamocha kivshuha. Bandits, robbers like you have trampled this field. The little girl telling the rabbi of the generation this story. And he records in the Talmud. He says he learned from her about fear of heaven. He learned from her about the way of life. He says sometimes we do something because that's what everyone else does. But everyone else are thieves. They're robbers, they're bandits, they're wrong, they're liars, they're cheaters, whatever they are. Just because everyone is doing it, they ruin this poor man's field. So now there's a trail through the field. That means you can use it because everyone else did it.
He used the word tinoket, a baby, to show that when you're young, you're not that spoiled. That you're
Innocent.
you're not
You're
clouded
clear
by
of
other.
it, right.
Well, tinoket, in general, the term tinoket could be used till somebody even 12 or 13 in the Talmud's times. Okay, tinokot shel bet rabban, even essentially a person who hasn't been married yet is in the category of a tinoket. And I don't know how we would use that today. It literally means a baby. But you never know. I've met some 40-year-olds, by the way, that I would put in the category of tinokot. So let me hand out this sheet. Take one and just pass it around. I put this together in a few minutes before I came to the class, so forgive the fonts and the sizes, and I didn't get a chance. There's some old English in here. I didn't get to fix that either. This letter, I learned it once with Marlene back in the day, is Rabbeinu Avraham. He's the son of the Rambam, the son of Maimonides. His introduction to Talmudic legends and stories. My son.
I thought this would be one up, and we have two daughters.
You might be thinking of Rashi.
Rashi.
Oh, Rashi.
Yes.
Or three.
I don't know how many daughters. The Rambam had a very specific worldview when it came to Jewish thought. Very, you'll read something and you'll know the Rambam said it. It's very classic to him. His son has the same style. This is in English translated from the Hebrew. This letter upsets so many people that they claim that it's a forgery. Because they'd rather say it's a forgery and not believe in it than say that the Rambam's son wrote it and that they must be bound to it. But it's obvious that it's not a forgery. We've learned this letter many years. It's in the introduction to almost every Ein Yaakov, Agarata, the stories of Chazal, of our rabbis in the Talmud. Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam says the following. Somebody wants to read this for me?
Know that it is your duty to understand that whoever propounds a certain theory or idea and expects that theory or idea to be accepted merely out of respect for the author without proving its truth and reasonableness pursues a wrong method prohibited both by the Torah and human intelligence.
Pause that. Whoever propounds a certain theory, idea, concept, teaching, and expects me to believe in it just because they're a great person, or they're a famous person, or they're a whole, whatever name you like to fill in, is not just doing something wrong according to the Torah, but also according to human intelligence. You don't just believe people because they said something.
A chacham or somebody, if we start
Doubting.
doubt or
Questioning.
to questions, let's say, any chacham or any rabbi that say something, there is no end to it.
You're right, there's no end to it, so there's a way to do it. She's right. See, this concept is part of a two-sided coin. On one hand, we have an obligation of emunat chachamim, to believe that our scholars are not misleading us. They're not guiding us down the wrong path. But on the other hand, we also have an obligation not just to believe everything we hear. And perhaps his teaching is greatest taught in Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot says, that a person should learn by Torah scholars and like roll around in the dust of their feet, it says. And then it says, and you should be careful from their bite, that their bite is like the bite of a scorpion, and so on and so forth. Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin. Have you heard of Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin? I think I mentioned him last week, didn't I? Yeah, he was a student of the Vilna Gaon. Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin has a book called Ruach Nefesh HaChaim, which is essentially a parallel to the Tanya. It's the Lithuanian version of the Tanya. And another commentary on Pirkei Avot which is a spiritual, deeper. It's more according to the side of Sod, of Kabbalah on Pirkei Avot. So it's not exactly what you read in there is what you'll normally hear in a normal Pirkei Avot class. In Ruach Chaim, Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin writes, what does it mean, v'heve mitabek ba'afar agneim? You should roll over in the dust of their feet. Someone who speaks Hebrew, what does the word litavek mean?
Also to fight.
To fight. Avak, right? But it also means vivater Yaakov levado, v'yavek ish imo. Yaakov was left alone, and there was a man that came to struggle to fight with him. Who was that? That was the angel of Esav. Is a famous story in the Torah. Because of that, we can't eat the gira nasheh inside of the meat, and so on and so forth. Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin says you're allowed to mitavek. You have an obligation. You have an obligation to learn from the rabbis, to listen to the rabbis. But you also have an obligation to argue with them. But how do you argue with them? Ba'afar aglehem. You have to remember that I'm arguing, I'm struggling with my rabbi, but in respect, in a respectful tone, in modesty. I'm not coming, oh, you're just a faker, you're a liar. You don't do such a thing. Rather, it has to come from a place of respect, from a place of I know who you are, I respect you as my teacher, as my rabbi, as my mentor, as my rebbitzin, whatever it is that you're studying from. But I also have to challenge, because it says in the Gemara that a student cannot accept a teaching from his rabbi that doesn't sit right with him. And if this was only taught more, people would be speaking a lot more. Not every challenge is a challenge to disprove. Sometimes people challenge because they really want to believe what you're saying, but they need to work it through their mind. They're not challenging you because they think you're wrong or they want to prove that you're silly. And that's hard, sometimes in a form of a class. For example, here we have a nice discussion that goes around the table. In other places, it's more of a lecture. And that one person that gets up and keeps arguing, the whole point, they're trying to create a scene or provoke something, and that's not perhaps the right way to do it. So Rabbeinu Avraham says you can't just accept everything that you're taught.
Guys, where does it say in the Torah that you can't just accept it?
We're going to see now.
Oh.
From the standpoint of intelligence, someone want to read the next part to us?
Such a method is worthless, for it would cause one to minimize the importance of those things which, after scrupulous observation and proofs, ought to be believed. And from the point of view of the Torah, because it inclines from the true path and from the straight, leveled road. The Lord, praise be, he said, thou shalt not respect the poor person, nor honor the great person. In righteousness shalt thou judge.
What does it say? B'tzedek tishpot et ami. I believe those are the words. With righteousness should you judge. You can't choose between the rich person and the poor person because one is rich or because one is poor. That's how a judge must sit in the court. Just now we had somebody at my house who told us that there was a homeless lady here in San Diego, in the Mission Bay area, who was given a court summons because she stole a shopping cart to push around her stuff in. I don't know why the government wastes money on suing, so just take the shopping cart and go away. But they called her to court, and someone heard that she was going to court, and this lady's son bought her a nice outfit to wear when she got to court. Got her a haircut, gave her a shower, whatever, so she could come to court. And she won. She actually won the court case. And she said that if she hadn't dressed that way, or presented herself that way, she probably wouldn't have won this court case. And she's probably right. Because today you look at two people, they're sitting on the stand in front of you. One is a put-together person, and the other person looks like some schlepper from the street, literally. Who are you going to choose? Your feelings, your natural feelings are, obviously one of them is right and one of them isn't. But then you're not fit to judge, because you have already judged before you heard any of the side's arguments. It's for the same reason that when you come to court, a judge is never allowed to hear, I don't know how it is in American law, but in Jewish law, a judge is never allowed to hear an argument from one side, not in the presence of the other side. So you can't have the defense come and then the prosecution come. It has to be the judge comes in and hears it in real time from both people in the presence of the other person, because people are very careful to lie when there's another person who might challenge them. And so I might tell you all kinds of things about somebody when they're not listening. But when you ask me, hey, can you repeat it again in front of them? Can you repeat it again in front of them? Is it okay? Yeah? Then I probably won't say it because I'm not able to lie all the things that I would like to lie when it comes to that. So the Torah tells you that you can't You can't judge based on the way a person presents himself. And it also says, you shall not respect a person in judgment. And there's no difference between him who assents an idea without any evidence as to its integrity, and him who believes a person's statement simply because he respects the latter, and therefore contends that he is undoubtedly true, since it emanates from a great man like... I don't know who these people are.
What does it
from the
mean, you
Tanakh.
shall not respect a person in judgment?
You can't say, listen, there's a great rabbi who comes to court, and he's being sued by somebody in his congregation. And because he's such a great rabbi, it would look bad for the rabbinate, or probably he's a righteous person, and this person just wants to accuse them. You can't have such calculations in judgment. You have to judge based on the facts that are presented to you, and honesty and integrity. You can't say, oh, because they're this person or they're that person, then that's the road that I'm going to take.
On both ways, even if he's too rich not or too poor, they both have to have
Equal, very good. But this is halakha. I don't know if you know this. In the laws of Sanhedrin, unfortunately, in about 200 years ago, the rabbinic courts passed a rule that this halakha is no longer in effect because they were unable to enforce it. The halakha says that when two people come to court, and they stand in front of the rabbinic court, and one of them is a rich man, he's dressed nicely, and the other person is a very poor man, he's not dressed nicely, the rich man is not allowed to present his argument to the court until the court says, go and buy him the same clothing that you're wearing and let him come to court. The Rambam codifies this in halakha. This is halakha what must be done in the laws of Sanhedrin. Another one? Is he allowed?
Oh, but it's up to you, of course.
Up to me. Anything that'll keep him quiet.
He didn't finish. This is the one that he didn't finish.
No, he finished.
No, you don't.
Almost
So, today we can't do such a thing, but it was a nice idea when it lasted. There was a rabbi named Rabbi Chaim of Sanz. Have you heard of him before? Rabbi Chaim of Sanz, he once was asked about Hasidic. He was a Hasidic Rebbe. It was the Sanzer Rebbe. And he said, any person who tells me I have one Rebbe, he's my Rebbe, and I only listen to them, he said, I'm going to make sure that not only do they lose this world, but they're also going to lose the next world. It's Rabbi Chaim of Sanz. He said, you don't accept someone's teaching just because they are your teacher. He said, you have to figure out, is it true? What I'm hearing, is it true? Is it relevant? I don't just subscribe to a certain... Someone told me, I'm conservative, I can't do such a thing. In religion, I never knew that conservative or had such a strong stance on something. I told him, but is it true what you're doing? So it doesn't make a difference if it's true, but I have my loyalty to the conservative movement. Probably what we sound like sometimes when we speak about orthodoxy. It's a mistaken view. We have to analyze, is it true or is it not true? Not are we just doing things because we have to out of a loyalty to someone or something.
A corollary would be that you have to be active and not just a passive recipient. You have to actually participate. If
Yes.
you're questioning, you're looking.
It takes a certain level of intelligence, though, to be able to do that. Not everyone has that capability, nor were they taught that way.
If you have like a mindset where you just, whatever comes to you, say, okay. You're totally passive. It's like how we are maybe taught.
How many students in university challenge their professors?
But they're not encouraged to make.
If they do, what would happen to them?
They may have a problem.
They'll throw them out, give them bad grades.
They have
That
to spill out with their teacher.
right, it says it doesn't. Our rabbis teach us, "Ena baishan lamed," that the one who is shy cannot learn. Vena kabdan milamed, and one who is strict is not allowed to be a teacher, because they don't allow for the natural question and answer process to go through in a classroom. But more and more people in the world, that's how they teach. Look who's here. There's room this way if you want to come. Here, come here. Come. Come, Ima po.
I was just going to add that, when we talked about the person that's rich and the person that's poor, that the rich man needs to have the poor man look like himself.
Yes.
I think that, is it the symbol of American courts that justice has a blindfold on, because justice can't see that way. Justice can judge if they can't see people, then they're just hearing the testimony or whatever. So she's blindfolded, this figure of justice.
Well, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. It's to show that.
Does
you
it
really
does
have
it
to be
actually
that
happen though?
rational.
What measures are put
I haven't
into
seen too many blindfolds before. Just that one justice.
just that one justice? It's a good ideal to have.
Right.
And especially you're not in court. There's no people to deal with. You're in your own court of your head dealing with ideas. No, if you want to sit closer? No? Okay. I'm sorry. Says for all this, says Rabbi Yonatan, for all this gives no evidence as to the merits of the subject in question, and therefore is forbidden. There's a rabbi who got up in Lakewood and made a claim about a certain scientific field in medicine. He said, "This is good for you," or "This is bad for you," whatever he said. No, we must follow him because the rabbi said so. And the question was asked, this rabbi is not a doctor. So how does he have the right to make claims in the name of medicine when he doesn't represent medicine? And why would I listen to him in the field of medicine because he's a rabbi? Would you listen to your doctor in the field of religion? Your doctor tells you, hey, I think that fasting on Yom Kippur is a terrible thing to do. Not because of your health. I just don't like the idea of fasting in general. Would you listen to him? Say, nice, it's good for you, but my religion says that we fast, so have a nice day. Would you listen to your doctor tells you, I think this is what you should do on Shabbat. This is how you should heat up food on Shabbat. Who are you? What are you making decisions in halakha for? You're not a rabbi. The same thing is true in the other way around. You don't just look at a person, this person's a great person, must be that whatever they say is true. Do they have the credentials to back up what they're saying? Do they have the sources to back up what they're saying? This is a very important thing. Hava Peretz at the end of class today gave the following statement. And we'll read it in the Bible. Before we do that, the Rambam, Rabbi Avraham, ends off, and he says, let this be an opening and an introduction for whatever you will read or hear in the future of any darash or story, and cast thy lot among the true and virtuous scholars, but not among those who turn things upside down, who walk foolishly after all nonsense. And the Lord shall in His mercy lead you on the righteous path, so that your feet shall walk straight in His chosen path. Amen. Says Rabbi Avraham, I'm not just referring to the Talmud here. I'm referring to anything that you'll come across when it comes to the field of learning, of Judaism, of religion, of Torah. Analyze the sources and decide for yourself, are these things portraying the truth or just someone's opinion? Are you allowed to do that? With the proper respect, you're allowed to do this. With the proper knowledge, you're allowed to do this. When I was in yeshiva, the style of learning was you must question everything you're hearing. When I started teaching, I realized that I had been taught that way, but most people had not been taught that way. And it became a struggle. Interestingly enough, not between me and other people. My students had a hard time with me asking them to question me. What do you mean? Aren't you supposed to be teaching us things? I'm supposed to be teaching you things, and you're supposed to be challenging them so we can figure out if they're true or not. But they didn't understand that concept. It was very foreign to them.
Well, of course it is. Because that's not the way they taught in school.
But it's not a Jewish way to teach.
I understand. But they didn't go to Jewish schools.
But these kids had gone to Jewish schools. Not to yeshivot, but to Jewish schools. I'll even tell the truth, is not all yeshivot have this flag raised on top of their building of questioning everything that you're taught. I happen to be lucky and have teachers that taught me that way. There's an introduction to the Tanya, which most people probably don't know about because it's not popular, especially in Hasidic circles. There are many people who will go to their Rebbe and ask for permission to travel somewhere, to build something, to buy something, to all kinds of things. The first Lubavitcher Rebbe in the introduction to his Tanya was very angry at this practice. He said, why are you coming to me to ask me about things that involve this world? He said, I'm not an expert in your business, and I don't know how to build buildings, and I don't know, buy horses, and whatever people were doing at the time. He said, a rabbi is not a prophet. He said, in the time of the prophets, maybe you went to the prophet and asked him, should I do this, should I not do that? What do you see in the future? But a rabbi is not that way. And he therefore encourages Hasidim not to follow this approach that many people today would call, there's a word for it in religious literature, it's called Das Teure. You've heard of it before? Dat Torah. Well, everything we'll do, we're going to ask a rabbi. Now, it's a good thing on a different level. To consult with somebody who's objective is generally a good thing to do. You want to do something, you trust the person's judgment, so you lay out the story and say, what do you think should be done in this situation? Yes, that's good. But to believe that I'm going to go and they're going to shake their hand at me, and if they shook their hand this way, that means I should build, and if they put their hand this way, that means I shouldn't build. These things, the first Lubavitch Rebbe argued on very much and said it's not the right way to approach Torah. That's not the way we do things. And that brings me to our Peretz's class. Who here can read Hebrew for us? I need a Hebrew speaker, without vowels. דקרא, בבקשה.
כשגילה הקדוש ברוך הוא לאברהם אבינו את כוונתו להחריב את סדום, מה עשה אברהם? הוא התווכח עם הקדוש ברוך הוא.
I'm pausing here. This is paraphrased by the students. This is not repaired. This is actual Hebrew. אני אתרגם. When הקדוש ברוך הוא told Abraham about what he planned to do to Sodom, what did Abraham do? He questioned the הקדוש ברוך הוא harshly.
אברהם אבינו נברא, חוקר את הבורא, בוראו כדי לברר את הדבר.
Abraham, a created being, interrogated the Creator in order to clarify the matter. So Abraham Avinu hears, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to destroy Sodom. If God tells you He's going to do something, would your natural reaction be to argue with Him? She might. No, Dalia, what would you do normally? Okay, Hashem said, if God tells me something, then of course I'm going to do it. Avraham Avinu's natural reaction to Hashem speaking to him is to argue with him. And not just because he's a good Jew. Because this is the way Avraham Avinu understood truth must come out. I'm being commanded something, I'm being told that the world will be coming to an end, Sodom will be wiped out. Avraham Avinu questions HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to clarify, why are you wiping them out? For what reason are you wiping them out?
Which is interesting, because when the commandment is specific to him, he doesn't question
Right, I just wanted to say the same thing.
It's specific when it affects the whole world that he's really questioning.
What do you mean?
Well, when he...
Meaning in his personal struggles, where God says, leave the land, bring your son, you don't see this questioning coming up as much as when it affects humanity, he can't just be silent.
Hashem tell him, you should know that your descendants are not being slaves. And he doesn't argue for the sake of the Jewish people.
We brought in a few different concepts here. First off, not everything the Torah doesn't say was an argument has not been argued about. Now, the way our rabbis understand the psukim about Kehillat Yitzchak is that he was trying to clarify the matter. What exactly do you want? Which son? Which one? When? How? All kinds of questions he was asking. When it comes to the descendants of Avraham Avinu, it wasn't so much a demand from him as it was a gzerah on people he would never meet. And we do know that Avraham Avinu did wish for rachamim on them, for mercy on them, but there was practically nothing he could do at that point. She's right, there are challenges to this argument. But when it comes to Sodom, it's an interesting thought that personally he accepted what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, but when it comes to the community, he wasn't able to do that. It's similar to what I started off the class with today, which is, I'm allowed to hear something from my rabbi and do it. But in order to ask you to do the same thing, I would have to source it and verify it and be able to tell you, this is something that I think you should do. It makes sense. It's a good point to bring up. Mikan, from here.
מכאן אני לומד את גודל החשיבות לברר ולחקור כל עניין בעצמך. לא משנה מי ומה המקור.
From here I learn how important it is to investigate the truth for yourself, no matter the source. Okay.
היום גדול אחד אומר משהו וכולם מקבלים את דבריו, ואם מישהו לא יקבל, מבזים אותו.
So today, if a gadol says something, a great man says something, everyone just accepts it. And if a person doesn't accept it, they disgrace them. Now we have these issues happening right now in Israel. There are two chief rabbis in Israel. They've got 100 rabbis to sign with them. The Jews are not allowed to go up to the Temple Mount. It's true, that's their opinion. Anyone who challenges them, I'm not talking here politically. Are they a right-winger? Are they a left-winger? What is it, the law in Israel? What does the government say? I'm here talking from a purely halachic, a Jewish point of view. What about Maimonides going up to the Temple Mount? The Rambam himself writes that there was a day that he went up to the Temple Mount and he made that day into a holiday for himself, a personal holiday where he ate and he drank as if it was another Jewish holiday, the day he went up to the Temple Mount. So Maimonides didn't know that the chief rabbinate says you're not allowed to go up to the Temple Mount? Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu was interested in building a synagogue on the Temple Mount. Not a Ben Mikdash. There are parts of the Temple Mount that aren't being used. They have a small bit Knesset. You can go up and pray there if you want. Who was the supporter of this idea? The Lubavitcher Rebbe Alav Shalom supported having a small synagogue on the Temple Mount for Jews to pray. So when the chief rabbis say, all the rabbis in the world say that you're not allowed to go up to the Temple Mount, am I not allowed to challenge them just because they're the chief rabbis in Israel? I might not have the authority to put my view into action. They're the chief rabbis. I'm not. But this idea of challenging, everyone is allowed to challenge, especially if you have sources.
But even if you have the sources, you can challenge anybody. Nobody's better than you.
That's true. Respectfully, you have to know there's a reason why they are the chief rabbis, and I'm not.
Wouldn't you think
Yes?
the chief rabbi does it for political reasons?
So here, so Tamar asked a good question, and this is a theory that does go around the circles, which is it could be the chief rabbi does it for political reasons. The chief rabbi is a government figure. The government stance is Jews should not go up to the Temple Mount, and therefore the chief rabbis are essentially executing something. The chief rabbinate is part of which office? Do you know? It's under the auspices of. It's Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef and Rabbi Lau, right? These two rabbis, they're not part of the Misal Dadatot, part of the religious affair. They work directly for. You ever seen their stamp? They work.
The interior minister, maybe?
There's a police commissioner, right? Who does the police commissioner serve as? He serves at the pleasure of the mayor. The mayor, right? They're not employees of the mayor, but they are under his auspices. And there's no defense minister in the San Diego government that's going to tell the police what to do. In Israel, the chief rabbis are directly under the prime minister's office. There's nothing between. They work for Misad Rosh HaMamshala, for the prime minister's office, and so it could be thrown out there. Perhaps they're presenting a political view. There will be a problem in saying this. What's the problem in saying this? What's the problem in accusing two rabbis of following someone else's political agenda?
The Rabbanut in Israel in general, period.
So actually today I'm not hating on the chief rabbinate. I will soon, but not now.
Then it wouldn't be a democracy.
Not a democracy. What?
Well, then they're not really defending religion.
Okay. I'm accusing them of something much greater than not allowing Jews to go to the Temple Mount. I'm accusing them of, when it comes to Jewish law and a political agenda by their employer, they're going to go by their employer's political agenda and not by the law and the Torah, which then would make them what kind of chief rabbis? Puppets. And in order to accuse chief rabbis of being puppets, I would have to think twice, 3 times, 4 times. Not necessarily because it's not true. I'm not telling you it's not true. I'm telling you just that accusation is a very large one. So now they're going to tell me something is kosher. Now I'm backing up the Heritic world's claim that the chief rabbis wouldn't eat their food that they claim is kosher. They only say it's kosher because that's what the government wants them to do. Is that true? I would hope not. I would hope the chief rabbis aren't signing off on thousands of pounds of chickens that are kosher just because someone's paying them to do that. That accusation is much greater than we think it is. And so I'd rather go down the road of, our rabbis tell us, En Talmid Chacham in Masechet Sotah. A Torah scholar, En Talmid Chacham motzim mitachat yado. A Torah scholar does not bring out anything from under his hands that's not clean. So, if it's not correct, a Torah scholar won't say it or won't do it. That's also a big accusation or assumption or a general thought. And what is a Torah scholar for this regard? You can't be a Torah scholar and have a history of tax fraud with the FBI. It can't be that you're also a Torah scholar and Interpol is looking for you. It's a certain, to be a Torah scholar, you would have to fit into a certain genre of person that the world. Right. Well, those people are then taking themselves out of this category of. We had this problem. I'll tell you when we had this problem. Rabbi Yonatan Yosef, when he became the chief rabbi of Petach Tikva, it was his first job as a rabbi that he got. And he made big problems. I don't know, making problems. The problem was that the standards of the chief rabbinate in Tel Aviv were decided upon by Ashkenazi chief rabbis. And they were signed on by the Sephardic chief rabbis. And Rabbi Yonatan Yosef, as a young guy, just came from Egypt, started fighting with the chief rabbis. He said, who are you? Who are you to challenge the Sephardic chief rabbis? And he said, I'll tell you the problem with the Sephardic chief rabbi. It was Rabbi Uziel. He said, do you know what Rabbi Uziel's biggest problem was? Is he loved peace. And so Rabbi Uziel very often compromised on his worldview in order to create peace. He said, and so when Rav Kook suggested that the chief rabbinate guidelines follow Ashkenazi law, Rav Uziel argued with Rav Kook and then realized that he wasn't going to win and said, okay, I'll give in. He said, but why should I give in? Just because Rabbi Uziel gave in. Now he's essentially accusing Rabbi Uziel of being a puppet of Rav Kook. But it was said much more respectfully than that. But I'm not saying that Rav Ovadia Yosef was wrong. It could be that in a political arena, Rav Uziel really was influenced by trying to make Rav Kook happy. That could be it. What I was taught, though, and what I'm trying to teach you, is not everything that you hear from a reliable person is reliable information. And not because that person's trying to lie to you. I'm not accusing every reliable person in the world of lying. But there are certain things that they are good at passing on. This is their field. This is an area of expertise. When a person, my father, I was driving with him yesterday. My grandmother had a rule. Never argue with a doctor. Yeah, that was her rule. Now it's true. Probably, you know how hard it is when a person's in the hospital and the doctor's trying to do what's best for the patient. And the patient thinks they're a doctor. What's their medical training? They Wikipedia things a lot, and they have a WebMD app installed on their phone, and they're arguing. Now I'll tell you the truth, there is a risk in the world of medicine today that perhaps your doctor isn't looking out for your best interest, and they're looking out for their pocket's best interest or their insurance, but you shouldn't be hanging out with such a doctor. You should make sure the doctors you go to are people that you would trust. If you don't trust them, don't make them your doctor. Imagine if there was a psychiatrist, and his patient tells him, I shouldn't imagine, this happens every day, you're just trying to drug me up. You're not trying to help me out. I'm normal. You're the crazy one. Imagine if all those people were running around the world and what this world would look like. Now, are there corrupt psychiatrists? I'm sure there are. Everywhere. Sure. Like every field in the world. But the general working assumption is that when a psychiatrist tells someone something on an issue that involves their area of expertise, I trust them. When a doctor tells me something in the field of health, the general assumption is, I trust them. When a rabbi tells me something in the field of Jewish law, I trust them. But trusting them doesn't absolve you from your responsibility to research things, to know things. How many times have people saved themselves that a doctor prescribed a medication to them that would have conflicted with one of their medications they're taking, that if it wasn't for the fact that they checked it up online, they could have died from such a thing. In my family, my father was once misdiagnosed by a doctor. Most of you were around for the story. And he almost died, my father. If it wasn't for my mother fighting with the doctor, I could say that's a normal occurrence. If it wasn't, she literally saved his life. And my father, about 3 years ago, was in an elevator in a certain building in one of his jobs that he was consulting at. And there was a lady there, and they were talking in the elevator, and she had just lost her husband. My father said, what was the doctor's name? And it was the same doctor that had misdiagnosed him. And she said, I trusted the doctor and I let him operate on my husband. And my father realized that if it wasn't for my mom doing this, he could have ended up like the same person in this elevator. And so my father asked his lady, well, what happened with his doctor? Why didn't you sue him for malpractice? And she told him that he already lives in the Bahamas, in an island without an extradition policy, and that he's never coming back to America. He took his money with him and he fled the country. So yeah, you do have to argue sometimes. When you hear reports, like now from Israel, of a chief rabbi who's accused of taking $2 million worth in bribes. You have a rabbi in Los Angeles that many of you know, who helped take another $200,000 for his own personal pocket. And you ask yourself, do I just trust people because they wear a nice coat or they have a beard?
No, absolutely. You have to question.
You have to question, respectfully. Still the chief rabbi. This is still the rabbi of the community. Sometimes I tell you, go ask your rabbi a question. I never tell you, go tell your rabbi he's wrong. You're allowed to ask your rabbi a question. You have the right to do so. You don't have the right to embarrass anybody in public, even if they're a rabbi. You don't have the right to put someone down in public. There's a way to do things. There's a method. And if you follow this method, you'll come the closest to the truth possible. And at the end of the day, what are we looking for? We're not looking for anything aside from the truth. And I would like to believe that everyone else in the world is also searching for the truth. I know that I'm wrong, but I would like to believe such a thing.
You're idealistic.
Okay, B'ezrat Hashem. And when it comes to Torah specifically, next time you're about to ask a question, well, if you say that, then why does everyone in the world do X, Y, or Z? Don't ask the question. It's a silly question to ask. The proper question to ask is, well, I know that many people do not like the way you're saying. Can you prove to me that you're correct? Or can you at least disprove to me their opinion? That you're allowed to ask. That's a fair question. For someone to come, hey, Rabbi, I need your help figuring out if what you're telling me something, is it true? There are some people here that go to other Torah classes during the week. And they come to me after the class and say, Rabbi, you said something today, but I heard once in a class somewhere else. Sometimes I'll say, listen, I can't answer for them what they would say. But I'll tell you why I'm saying what I'm saying. And if you have the same relationship with them, you can present this argument to them, and I'm sure that they will help you out. And the response by most people has been they've gone back to the other teacher. And how could you come in and question what I'm saying? Great. Great. It's not the way we study. It's not the way we learn. When I got critiqued last year Pesach, I got an email from a rabbi who told me, I saw your book. He didn't tell me I heard a class. Didn't tell me that. And everything you said in there was wrong. So I told him, I was a very respectful email, actually. Normally my response is very angry, but I answered respectfully, and I said, I wrote the book with many, many sources. I'm happy for you to tell me where I'm wrong, and to give me sources proving that I'm wrong. I never heard back from the man again. When I printed my book, I made a point of every source that I can find. Even if it disagreed with me, it should be in the book. And I'm sure there are more sources than what I brought in my book. But it's a style of writing that I'm not the ultimate authority on anything. I'm just presenting arguments the way I see them. I'm teaching things here the way I see them. You analyze the things that we study here the way you see them. I'm sure that all of you come out of this class with a different idea, with a different feeling, with a different concept that came to you. But you must never turn off your brain. Don't do it. It's a terrible thing if you would do it. You lose your compass in life of where you should be going, what you should be doing. There's a story about a professor. He was a professor of ethics and morals. They saw him stealing a wallet from somebody. And when he got in trouble, they asked him, how could you teach ethics if you're an unethical person? He said, the professor next door to me is a geometry professor. Do you expect him to be a triangle? And the truth is, he's right. In the world of academia, what you teach is not necessarily who you have to be. I'm sure there are people who teach music who are not musicians. I'm sure there are people who teach Spanish that they speak Spanish, but they're not from Spain, or they're not Mexican, or it's not there. There are all kinds of people who do all kinds of things, and it's not their area of expertise. But to teach Torah, to be delving into the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to stand for something. You can't say, listen, so I'm God forbid, Nambi. You can't say, this rabbi, he's accused of rape and he's accused of money laundering. But you know what? He gives nice parsha classes. I'm going to go. You crazy? To learn Torah from such a person? It's bad enough the person's not in prison, but also to go study from them? That's a crazy thing. It's unheard of before. In our history, it's unheard of. There's a rabbi today. He's on the run from every intelligence agency in the world. He keeps smuggling himself into countries that have no extradition policy to the country he's been in before. He's been on the run now for about 2 years. He's accused of all kinds of things. He claims he's not going back to where he came from because he won't stand a fair trial. He might be right. But I'm going to think twice before I send my kids to him for Rosh Hashanah. Before I go study to be a rabbi by him, I'm going to think 3 times. He puts out a YouTube video, I'm just not going to listen to it. There are enough people in the world that are pure, good people. There are enough teachers in the world that you can connect to that don't have problems. And you have the ability to choose that. When you have a choice to read a book, to learn something from a classic source. And someone asked me now, between this rabbi and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which book should I read? So let me tell you about this rabbi. I don't know much about him, but all I know is that what I know about him, I wish you didn't know. The Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away from this world, perhaps with a lot of controversy, but without one bad thing being said about him. He left this world, I'm not using the word that Christians use of a saint, as a tzaddik. Nobody will argue with you that he wasn't a tzaddik. And so when you want a reliable source of spiritual information, that's the right address to go to. Don't go looking with some person who has a history with the CIA. It's not the right place to look. And it's silly for me that I have to be telling you this. But the world is a very naive world. And they listen to things and hear things and learn things and study things that are not true. And it's a mistake.
But presidents came to the Rebbe to ask him questions too.
I already told you that the Lubavitch Rebbe was a tzaddik. I agree. He's the right person to study from. Just now, my wife discovered a book of Chassidut, and she wanted to study it. And she was more cautious than I was. I said, hey, it looks like a real rabbi. I'm going to read it. She said, no, I don't know. I don't know if I should study something from this rabbi. And she called up her father. And her father said, he knows that this rabbi was alive when my father-in-law lived in Yerushalayim. He said, I know him. He's a brilliant Talmid Chacham. He put out many books. He's a reliable source of information. Do that next time you buy a book. Figure out what are you putting into your system. Just like you wouldn't eat food that had all kinds of terrible things inside of it for you, don't consume knowledge or information that is bad for you. We have a few more minutes left. I wanted to open up this table to what we discussed about right now. Thoughts, ideas that come up, yeah.
But when you talk about Rabbi Uziel, because he was a person who seems to be someone who was very reasonable and very amenable to making things work, I wouldn't assume that he'd be a puppet. I would feel that he did it because he felt that really, really, really at the deepest level of being intelligent, and that he decided to give it to Rabbi.
Okay, so Rav Ovadia Yosef did
And ignore the end result.
Okay, what Rav Ovadia Yosef did say is, like you, yes, he gave in to Rav Kook. I'm not accusing him of being a puppet, but perhaps in the 1948, 49, 50 rabbinate, there really wasn't a choice. We're all coming from all kinds of countries, all kinds of places. To accept one protocol made sense. So today, you're sitting here, 67 years later, you have the luxury now to set up a more sophisticated framework than just one way is the way that we do it. And so if we can, so why not? He would suggest perhaps that Rabbi Uziel would make a different decision had he lived today.
Very likely.
Right, exactly. So thanks, Marlene, for pointing that out. We're not accusing Rabbi Uziel of being a puppet.
Second, it says that this method of not getting sources is prohibited by the Torah. But where is it in the Torah? Is it where it says you shouldn't be prejudiced by the way a person presents himself if they're rich or they're poor? So the sages learned from that means you have to look for sources.
When I hear something, can I give you a good example? We were in yeshiva, and our parents, I remember that first time that he taught us that you must make a blessing before you wash your hands for bread, and not afterwards. You know what kind of uproar? Now all the old students who were there for years before, and he does this every year, once a year. So in my second, third, fourth year, I already knew what it was going to look like in the room. All of us old folk were, oh, come on, again you're bringing it up, and again those little guys are going to get mad. But it's a learning curve, it's a process. And someone said, Rabbi, if you're right, and if I go through all the sources, who am I still to argue with Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, with Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, with Rabbi Eliashiv? They name names of big rabbis. They're greater Torah scholars than I am. And Rav Peretz made a very interesting argument. He said, I don't think you're right. He said, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef might be, and I know some of you might think I'm crazy for saying this, might be the most well-versed, brilliant Torah scholar alive today. But how many hours do you think he spent studying the laws of when you make a blessing before you wash your hands for bread? You might be able to become a bigger Talmid Chacham than him in this one area. You're not saying that you're smarter than Chacham Ovadia everywhere else, or that you know more than Rabbi Moshe Feinstein everywhere else. But in this specific halakha, they said you become the world expert on the laws of washing your hands for bread. And then you have the right to argue with somebody who's greater than you. And this idea of you can also reach that level of Talmid Chacham. It's an important thing to know that you can do that.
If you put an effort in, I'm telling
Yeah, it takes effort and time. You can't argue just like a unintelligent boor. People do that, but you're not supposed to.
So you do say the Racha before.